Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. We are excited. We've got two industry legends and a host. Let me introduce my partner, Tony Ponturo, who he and I started almost 2 years ago doing the show. Audience numbers keep growing from the very first episode that's aired to the very last one, so we are pleased with that. Tony has now taken on some new responsibilities and all things. We're all moving forward, which is key in life. So, Tony, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Ray. Everything's good. Got a lot going on in the world, so
yes,
we'll get into it.
Yes, indeed, we will. And Joe Uva, who is a dear friend, industry legend to both of us. In fact, Joe Uva, welcome to the Wisdom Circle.
Thank you, Ray. Tony, good to see you.
Joe, good to see you.
Takes on a new version of how you doing, because we can really...
Exactly.
Well, without doing too much history, which is, fun for us, but maybe not for our audience, the fact of the matter is about 30 years ago, Tony was running a golf outing at Anheuser-Busch. That's where I sat on a bus next to Joe. He and I got to spend time on that bus and playing golf, and then wound up together at OMD and NBC. And Tony, was circling all that and has always been a good friend. So there is an interesting connection here that's a little more personal, I guess, at least for me. And, that's fun. So, that's the background on why are we here today. Well, we're here to really talk to Joe about a very impressive career and an awful lot of influence in the industry. I mean, they call him, he's a Uva guy. Joe Uva hired, 20 of the bigger names in the advertising business over the last 20 years. So he's had quite an influence on a lot of people, including me. So Joe, let's go to, the question one, which is always a little bit about when you were thinking about getting into this crazy business, or were you, what was your, first step?
Great. So when I got out of college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do other than I wanted to pursue a career in either advertising or public relations. And after going through doing research and understanding some of the companies and what the agency business was like, I was fortunate enough to land a job as an assistant media planner buyer at Gray Advertising. So the first 3 years of my career I spent on the agency side before making a move into the ad sales side. And one of the reasons I did that is the sales guys always seemed like they were having more fun than the agency guys and the clients. The sales guys seemed to be having great expense accounts and made a lot more money. And it just seemed like a lot more fun. And I think intellectually, there was another part of this. And that was that when you're at an agency or if you're at a client, you're limited to one or two accounts or a certain portfolio of brands. You're in sales. You have a diversified list. So you're seeing everything. You're seeing the broad industry and you can cut across. So your opportunity to really understand multiple industries and how they go to market, et cetera, was always appealing to me as well. Yeah. After my first sales job at USA Network in 1980, I was fortunate enough in 1984 to join Turner Broadcasting, where I spent the next 18 years and rose from account executive to president of sales and marketing for Turner Broadcasting System. Throughout that time, Turner underwent some fundamental changes, not only with the growth and expansion of CNN and its portfolio, but the acquisition of the MGM film library, with the acquisition of Hanna-Barbera's library, with the acquisition of creation of Turner Classic Movies and TNT, and certainly all the major sports rights that we were able to acquire in the relationships we've had with many leagues, and obviously with the top 50 advertisers, including Anheuser-Busch and Coca-Cola, among others. But it
That's a
was an
lot of
interesting time.
that was a lot of added stuff to a portfolio that you did not join with, right? I mean, the growth was
Correct.
pretty amazing.
And it
So,
happened very quickly.
yep. And Tony, I'm not going to hijack this broadcast or podcast, whatever I call it. So there are a bunch of people who will know the name Ted Turner, and a bunch of people who will be curious, and there might be a few who haven't. But give us a minute or 30 seconds on what was it like to work for Ted Turner, who's an industry legend too.
Well, I think, Ted really is responsible for the creation of advertising supported cable television in this country. He drove that from the very beginning. He was a true pioneer. For those of you listeners who don't know, he also was a very accomplished yachtsman and won the America's Cup. That really was had a lot to do with his rise in fandom among sports enthusiasts. At the same time, he was a brilliant leader. And I think what I learned from Ted was a leadership style that I tried to carry with me throughout my career. And that is, Ted used to say, God, the guy must be so hard to work with. He seems like he's always yelling and ranting and raving. And he was just so committed to what he was doing and believed and was so passionate about it. And he also had this vision of what it could be and how to get there. Now, part of Ted's genius was he could see it, and he was smart enough to know that he couldn't build it. So he needed people who could do that for him, and recognizing that. So one of my guiding principles was always, you better really early on learn what you don't know, and then find out and find the people who do know about it, and surround yourself with them. But when it came to his leadership style, Ted was different because he drove you really, really hard when times were good, because he knew there were going to be lean times. So when times were good, he would beat you up and you'd walk out of a meeting and say, what the hell? I just brought in $2 million worth of new business and this guy's kicking my butt. And but when times were tough, nobody was better about keeping your spirits up and raising you up and saying it's going to be better. We're in this together. Let's go out. We're a team here. And he took the pressure off during tough times. And I think that was why he attracted so many people who really, we could run through walls for the guy.
Well, a lot of guys or gals would pound the desk when times were bad and say, yeah, no kidding, the market's good. I'm glad you did well. So that's a flip of that.
Yeah.
Tony, I'm guessing at some point you met Ted.
Sorry?
I said at some point, I'm guessing you met Ted.
Yeah, I was going to tell two stories since you set me up. One was when I was a media buyer, glorified media buyer at McCann from 79 to 82, Ted was going around meeting agencies. And I always tell people at, 9 in the morning, he'd have a styrofoam coffee cup with his chew of tobacco in, spitting his tobacco juice in, and saying, of course you want to buy, 24-hour news and the Brave Superstation and stuff like that. I mean, he was pretty dramatic. The other one that was sort of interesting was probably about 95 when I was at Anheuser-Busch. And, like a lot of cities, but St. Louis had sort of the secret society of corporate people. And they would literally meet in caverns to decide, the future of St. Louis. And a neighbor who was with a big law firm I won't mention said, hey, could you get us Ted Turner? And I said, well, I could probably ask. Well, I said, I can ask. But then he said, but just know you can't come because you're not part of it. You don't know the handshake, So it's like, okay, you guys are such a big shot. You can't get Ted Turner. You have to ask me, but I can't come. So what I did is the night before, because I said to Ted, I can't come, we did a dinner at a place called the Log Cabin Club, which was a small little social club in St. Louis. And we did our own dinner. But what's so amazing, and I was going to ask you, Joe, connected to Turner, as you talk about risk, two things that went in my mind. Like Ted Turner. August Bush was, sort of a tough boss, but an honest boss. And I think all of us, and something to maybe express to our younger people in our audience, is you can be a bit of a fist pounder, but us as employees know if it's a substantive fist pound. There's people that are shallow and empty suits that pound the fist, and it's like, I'm not really going to listen to you because I don't see the substance the other 360 plus days a year. But a Ted Turner, which you just echoed, and an August Bush, they would put the pressure on you, but you knew they weren't afraid of the work themselves. They were right alongside it with you, and I think that's key. The other thing, and I'll throw it to you, Joe, is we talk a lot about, Ray and I talk a lot about with guests, is the risk taking that you take in a career. So people today, if you're 25 years old, you don't really remember or know, or you weren't alive when cable started. And today it looks like, well, of course you did cable. And of course, Joe went to USA and cable and to Turner. But in those days, who knew, right? So in your mind, although you sort of laid it out pretty succinctly, but did you feel you were taking a big risk, or did you have enough confidence in yourself? Well, if this thing called cable doesn't work, I'll figure it out somewhere else because I have confidence in who Joe Uva is.
That's a great question, Tony. And I think it's a combination of two things. One was, like you, I had an early interaction with Ted Turner. In fact, I'm going to a 30-second stage setting for you. 1977, Ted Turner walks into Gray Advertising. Nobody wants to sit and talk to him because they don't know who the hell he is. And he's there talking about this. And he brings in the guy who you, Tony, know, Jim Trahey, who was the head of sports sales for Ted. Anyway, somehow they found out that I worked on an account called Block Drug. And Block Drug made a product called BC Powders. Remember Take a Powder?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So, and the market list aligned perfectly to where WTBS was received throughout the Southeast. So somebody directs them to the head of network, who directs them back to the planning groups. And somehow the guy who's been in the business for all of a cup of coffee winds up sitting in a room with Ted Turner and Jim Trahey. And I have no idea who this guy is. But in 5 minutes, he has captivated me with what he wanted to do. I wrote it up and made a recommendation that we should buy it. And the client said, well, it matches up perfectly. How much money does he want? I forget what it was, probably $80,000 or something. And I was like, buy it, bought a sponsorship. And that was my first introduction to cable television and to Ted. And I followed him. And so when USA Network had an opening for its first advertising sales account executive, I applied for it. And the second part of that was on the risk side. Did I have enough confidence in myself that the cable thing didn't work out? I always figured agencies were going to be around forever. So I could always go back. So it was in my mind, it was a soft landing. But yeah, it was a little scary at first.
Yeah, because expense account coming in, right?
Yeah.
And USA back then, the USA Network back then, Joe, that was owned by Dolan, right? Was that?
No, it was Madison Square Garden, and
that's right. He didn't own the Garden yet.
United Columbia Cablevision, and Gulf and Western, and then they sold a piece of it to MCA. So when I joined.
That's right.
They had changed, and Kay Coppola, they changed the name from Madison Square Garden Sports Network to USA Network, and then it grew from there.
The rest, as we say, is history.
Right.
Well, that's some good stuff. Yeah, it's very cool.
Let me throw in one question just to take it to a weird. So both of you worked on Spanish language television, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what is your take on the Bad Bunny thing and the Super Bowl and the halftime and him speaking in Spanish? Because I'm sure you all dealt with various Spanish versus English, and you two are pretty good experts to give an assessment to that, I think. Not to throw you a political hot potato, but
go, Joe. Yes, you.
I think the ratings were probably higher than Kid Rock's. But
Yeah, yeah,
look, I just think when you look back over the Super Bowl and you look about the diversity of the artists who have performed at halftime, um, and you look at the highest ratings, as you guys know better than I, they came really from minority
yep,
populations.
yep.
So whether it was Kendrick Lamar or whether it's Bad Bunny, Michael Jackson. So
Beyonce.
I just think that the attention it got was heightened by the fact of what's going on in the country with immigration.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, the NFL gets, I'm sure Apple pays $1 gazillion as Pepsi used to. I know that from Joe, our OMD days. But the NFL just wants to bring in the whole world to be NFL fans. And they're willing to take the risk that a whole bunch of 50 plus demographics are out of their minds for the 30-year-olds in Australia watching the Super Bowl in a bar at 2 in the morning or whatever, because the NFL's like, yeah, this is not all we do. Seahawks and Patriots, that's not all we do. We want to be a global brand. So I think it was all about expanding the global footprint of the NFL and not giving a hoot about what a whole bunch of people think for 13 minutes. Let them go get a beer, watch Kid Rock lip sync badly. Right. It was embarrassing. I mean, this guy literally, I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but the Kid Rock lip sync was so, like, he literally was singing, making mouths, and it was just like a drum solo. And then when he was singing, it was just backwards. So it was kind of laughable. But I understand it. I understand why a percent of this country would be not happy. And I think the NFL says, yeah, sorry, not sorry.
Yep.
Well, a lot of people,
I also
go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, the other thing is everybody said there was no English spoken during it. Yeah, it was. Lady Gaga sang in English.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was totally okay for it. A lot of people don't realize, and I explained this to a neighbor over dinner 2 nights ago. I said, you know how the halftime show first started? I said, the NFL wanted to sell the Super Bowl globally, and they would go to countries and they would say, I'm not interested in the Super Bowl. They said, well, what if you buy the Super Bowl and guess what? It's a 15-minute, 13-minute Michael Jackson concert and all the way down the line. They go, no, now I'm interested. So it's always been, to Ray's point, a way to grow the brand internationally, and the music was the hook, was the way to get TV distribution. And it just blew up from there. So,
yeah. I wonder what would happen if FIFA put Lady Gaga on, because they do Shakira and they'll do Bad Bunny and they'll do, like, they're keeping it in the house. Like, what would happen if they put Lady Gaga on at halftime? Because, why not? I mean, bring in a new audience that way. I mean, what I've said before is every league that isn't FIFA wants to go international, and FIFA wants to be bigger in the US. I mean, they're both in such counterpoints. And I think the NFL is doing a better job than FIFA in a big way. So, period. End of sentence. All right, so Joe, let's stay on the Spanish language pivot because you have others to get to. What was it that brought you to Univision? Well, CEO, not bad, right?
Well, I think, I'm going to take a step back because it was really at OMD that I started to pay a lot more attention to Spanish language media. Because I noticed that some of the clients that we had, we didn't handle their Spanish language spend and in the US. And so by paying more attention to it, and with Univision being the biggest of the Spanish language media companies in the States, got to know them very well and understand what they had to offer. And the connection was so powerful and so strong. And we did at OMD become the largest buyer of Spanish language media in the United States. And that was one of the things that fascinated me. And it was at a pivotal time because it was right when people started to say, wait a second, in the 2010 census, when it comes out, there's going to be an enormous uptick in the percentage of Hispanics in this country who
Yep.
overwhelmingly, the majority still have Spanish as a primary language.
Mm-hmm.
And when you started to look about what that economic impact could and would be, I really saw an opportunity there to say this is a way to help move money more in
Good.
line where the population and the economic growth was going to come from.
Well, I went to CARA from OMD, and we wound up closing down our Spanish language media planning because everything was going out the door. Damn it. So how did the Univision guys decide we should bring this guy into our company? I mean, he was a believer.
So don't forget, 2006, Jerry Parenchio put the company up for auction in the summer, July of 2006. And there were multiple private equity firms that were bidding on acquiring them, including their biggest partner, Televisa, out of Mexico. Mm. Televisa had a partner with somebody else because of the ownership cap on local stations and both radio and television. Anyway, a group of 5 private equity companies, TPG, Madison Dearborn Capital Partners, T.H. Lee out of Boston, Providence Equity, and Haim Saban Capital Group got together, and they made the winning bid. And they were looking for a CEO. And the operating partner at T.H. Lee was a guy named Rich Bressler. Rich Bressler had been the CFO of Time Warner when I was at Turner, and we had a good relationship. And he made the introduction to the recruiting firm, and then I sat down and went through a series of interviews with them, and they were very concerned that there wasn't a great relationship with Televisa and it needed to be rebuilt. And they didn't know for sure whether they could do that with the existing leadership. Although I worked with that existing leadership for a few years before a couple of people retired, and things we were able to build bridges back with them. But that's how I wound up with.
Right. Tony, what was your experience? I mean, I don't know how much you talked about a little bit on LinkedIn or with some text about Spanish language and Anheuser-Busch, pre-InBev and Modelo and all that. But were you guys very active in that space? Did you identify that?
We got real active. We were one of I think, the first single advertisers, since we did everything in-house, to recognize Spanish language television and specifically Univision. So we were, back then we were probably a $5 to $10 million advertiser on Univision, which was a lot of money back then. And one of the things we learned by that, and I've talked a lot about the wholesaler system, is we would run commercials, what I would call what we thought were generic Hispanic commercials, but you would get our wholesaler in Florida saying, well, those are Mexican icons you're using in the commercial, right? That's not Cuban or Dominican, And all of a sudden we learned that Hispanic creative advertising, one size doesn't fit all. It'd be like, talking to an Italian with German, icons and pop-up bands and saying, we're talking to you Italians because you're from Europe. So it was a real sensitivity. And then being such a big soccer supporter, starting with the '86 World Cup, all the way through all the World Cups to this day, as InBev keeps it going. And one of the first sponsors of MLS, the U.S. soccer team, we understood that the Hispanic population, A, was very important, and B, and even to this day, is the largest growing ethnic group in
And
this
will
country.
be like for the
Yeah, there'll
next
be
30 years.
five or six states where the Latino population will be the number one population.
There's no
So
question.
as a consumer brand,
Yeah.
you better, you better know what you're talking about. I always, in conversations 360 here, talking with Gary Bettman at the NHL, I said, the tough problem you have of growing, you always want to grow your core audience. But if 30% of today's U.S. population is Latino, African American, and Asian, and they're not hockey fans, that's a tough way to grow. You're only growing with 70% of what's out there. So
Right.
any consumer brand, and that's why the NFL, yes, on the international thing, going back to Bad Bunny, but they want to grow that Latino market. They need to
Yep.
connect to that market as well. So everything's attached to how do you connect to all the consumer base, not just some of the consumer base.
So Gary Bettman, you know Gary well. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I thought you were done.
No, I was.
Did you finish? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was.
No, because I know you're pals with Gary. Somebody's got to tell him to present hockey as soccer on ice skates. Because that's
I'm not
what
sure
it
what
is.
that means, but
Well, you've got a goalie, you've got forwards, you've got a defensive line, and you've got scorers. It's exactly what soccer is. It's a net on either side of the ice. And the only difference is that football is played on a grass pitch and hockey is so like if they were ever to figure out how to bring in some Spanish hockey players I just feel like the games are the same except for the ice and the grass. And there's something there that could be fun. Online video games. I don't know. I don't do that anymore, but that's my grand
well, they
thought.
saw it a little bit. It's not quite the same, but their World Cup was extremely, successful last year. Obviously, now you have the Olympics going on, but it is about everything's becoming the canvas is the world, not just the country. And so how
That's
can
right.
you integrate your sport to everybody? And
They could do things with FIFA,
yeah,
Their
I
World
think
Cup
I
kinda
hear you.
small.
I mean,
All right. I'll leave it alone.
you could tell them that. It's your
He won't
big
return
idea. You tell them.
Or maybe I'll send them a note. No, that's all the kind of stuff that I think, we were talking about language. And so I think one of the other things we wanted to talk about is and Ramon and I, our producer who does such a great job, Ramon Ramos, and I were talking before we got on about the new language of media, right? And how we deal with it. Used to be GRPs and 30-second spots and billboards, side of the road. Right. And now it's, logos in front of places where people have to wait in line and they count the Instagram impressions. Just I would love your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, Tony, you're doing a little bit of active in that world. Joe, you got your podcast business, Revolver, doing all that stuff, and I think our audience would love to hear from you guys.
I think it's we talked about this 30 years ago, and it's more true today than ever before about how quickly things change. And now we're seeing things change on multiple fronts on a daily basis. And it's really hard to keep up with the innovations and with all of the opportunities that those innovations create. So the idea that there is a one size fits all language for media that we used to have is gone. Yeah. In my view, I don't think that exists anymore. I think really looking at what is driving these business results and where does media as we know it today or can anticipate as much as we can what it may be tomorrow is really a big challenge. And I think that's where a lot of the risk is for marketers and advertisers. I think for the end of my career on the big media company side, everything was fundamental, basic metrics, right? KPIs, free cash flows. Today, while that still remains very important, and share price certainly, and earnings per share, and a concern about what's the workforce going to look like today, tomorrow. Where am I going to get? Is this going to be done by machines more than it is by humans? How are supply chains affected by it? And I think all of that gets into decisions that media can or cannot solve for them. And by that, I mean, you think about, Tony, you said something about the wholesalers and everything when you were talking about back in AB. Think about today, if you had to talk to those guys about why the supply chain is changed, and how are you going to communicate with them? What is the media that's going to get them comfortable with, hey, I'm still getting AB commercials, I'm still getting everything I used to get. But I do think it's there is no one size fits all language, and I think that it's incumbent upon a new generation of leaders to try to define how things are going to unfold. I think one of the biggest things right now that's going on is this whole notion about today the story broke about somebody wrote something in one of the newsletters, instead of being, or maybe it was in The Economist, instead of somebody, everybody looking to regulate social media and prevent teens from going on, banning them from it, should really do just the opposite, embrace their involvement, but push everything back onto the tech companies to solve the problem, as opposed to shutting a growing population out of the medium they're most comfortable with.
Yeah, usually when you prohibit things, young people, it makes it more attractive to young people. It's sort of a tough thing to balance. I think, for leadership, and Ray and I talk about this a lot, I mean, it's really about keeping a really open mind, really observe. The consumer will tell you where you need to go. If you're a broadcaster, you're a brand, it's like, follow the consumer. There was a great thing on Instagram today. I sent it to our team at Echelon, where Pendleton, the exercise machine, I think I'm saying the name right, was basically bankrupt. And they brought in a new CEO. And what he observed was it wasn't the equipment they were always emphasizing this is the modern great equipment. It was the interaction with the trainers doing the video that was the connection with, Joe's my trainer on the exercise bike and I'm connected. So all of a sudden they redesigned it as it's this community of people exercising, connecting to the trainer and their group. And now they're making money. So, it was a great, so another.
That's like give them the bike for free and sell the advertising.
Well, yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that, it's human observance is the biggest research data you could have. And a lot of people shut their brain down to like, well, that's not me, or that's too young, or that's too old, or that's whatever, on both sides of the spectrum, rather than just keeping an open mind. And it's really big for the advertiser. The other sort of on the sermon steps here is that I'm always impressed with traditions. Now, if you take the Masters, as I think Jim Nance says, the tradition like no other.
Right.
There's something about being who you are, not getting caught up in things, and the 14-year-old kid who likes golf to the 84-year-old man, they love the Masters, right? Because there's that tradition. There's things like the Super Bowl. Why does it get 130 million viewers? So the tradition of things are important as well. As long as I once used a poster for a meeting we had actually out in Beaver Creek for my team, was about 100 plus people, and I showed 7 decades of the Budweiser bottle and how the label had subtly changed over time. And it was to make the point is it's the same brand, it's the same product, but it's had to adjust to times. It was ultimately used in our shareholder report because it sort of set it in one picture. And I think that's what we're all trying to do in this business is keep adjusting to what's out there. But I'm a firm believer that the basic principles of marketing, human reaction don't change. It's just how we take it in and how we present it. So
that's a great point, Tony. I also think that with the democratization of media today and storytelling, to your point about let the consumer will lead you there.
yeah,
Just look at all the influencers who are content creators who are telling stories that they want to hear themselves.
yes, exactly.
And how easily the discovery process is because of platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. And just what storytelling is. They could, Susie, 10 years old, next door to me, can have the same impact on a community of followers that Martin Scorsese has with a feature film. I mean, it's
staggering. All right, so I want to throw out a couple of questions because there's just so much we could talk about, and we do have to go at some point. Although I do this all day. So we talked about the problem solver. I think Ted Turner, that was the best example of a guy who has the grit, determination, the vision. And I don't know, Tony, did you have anybody in your experience? I guess you were talking about August Bush, kind of the same guy. I think it really does take like a person. I'm not sure. I mean, I've worked for Burke and Murphy. I think together they had that vision. But it's rare, it's rare.
It's rare, and and what I think what Joe said about Ted Turner, and I experienced it with August Bush. It's hands-on leadership. It's not corner office,
Right.
Crystal Palace kind of thing. It's
Right.
walking down the hallway and say, what's the inflation on national TV, Ponturo? Or what's our share of voice in Louisville, Kentucky, Ponturo? Or why did I see that Miller sign at Three Rivers Stadium, Ponturo? That's CEO questions. Those are not normally CEO questions, but those were the CEO questions that I get. And I'm sure Joe got. And so that's what makes a company, as I'll let Joe tell the Turner Broadcasting story, but that when I started had 3 brands and 22 market share, and when we sold the company reluctantly had 50 market share and 50 brands, all by pushing the boulder up the hill and not taking no for an answer.
But you had a long-term, and you had a long-term single leader at the top of the company.
Yep.
Right?
And we had long-term employees. We all worked 25.
Yeah.
I would get guys from teams or women from teams saying, well, I'm now with our 3rd team trying to sell you something, and you're the same guys. So it was almost embarrassing, which is like, like if we wanted to be, somewhat, have fun with them saying, okay, what are you selling today, Ray? You selling Raycon, ABC Sports? Are you selling Telemundo? What are you selling? It's like
Sam Darnold, Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, but they would almost apologize for it, where we were like, I had
funny.
Don Garber once say to me, the commissioner of the MLS, say, this was like, it was within 3 years of the end of the AB time, but I'd been there 20 plus years. And he said, doesn't it feel like Groundhog Day, to you, like you keep doing the same deal and stuff? I said, not really, because it's everything's a new adventure, but that was sort of his idea. Actually, one of our guys, now don't let me digress too much because of time, I won't name his name, went to the NBA for a job after his AB days. And this head of HR actually said, because you worked at Anheuser-Busch, not the company, but the company for 20 years, I don't think you're a go-getter because you stayed at the same place at the same time. Now, I would hope that guy's no longer there, but at the NBA.
I bet he's probably running HR for Facebook right now.
So anyway. All right,
that's
take us
the way
home,
it is
Ray.
now.
Take us
Nobody
home.
gets
I'm going to shut up. We've got about 10 minutes. Take us home.
Yeah. So I have a question I want to ask Joe first, and I'll give a take on it as well. So, there are the 2 old ad axioms of, I'm sure half my money's wasted. I just can't figure out which half. And I know when I advertise, I sell more. And when I stop advertising, I sell less. where do you think that sits? Pick either one or both. You know, where do you think that sits? Is half my advertising wasted? Is 80% of it wasted? Is none of it wasted? Like, it's got to be so much harder, I think, to know where to put your impressions, right? Or is it
Well,
easier?
I think the tools that people have to make those decisions today are far more um, pervasive than they were when we were doing this stuff 30 years
Overnights.
ago. And I think that there's a lot of things you can measure and see what impact there is. And I think marketing mix is much more important today than it ever was. And I think it goes back to, don't never discount the value of word of mouth, because what is social media when you think about it?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that all of that comes into play. So I think you have more tools available to do it. It's deciding what do you want to measure, how often, and to what end. And I don't know that it's as simple as saying 80% works, 20% is wasted, or whatever. I think it's much more. There's more calculus involved in that today.
And they may have more tools to know exactly what
Yes.
the number is, right?
Yeah.
And to play with the dials and the levers.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with when you talk about top and bottom of funnels, and when you talk about what are people looking at in terms of attribution, and how does that convert to sales, and is it performance-based media? Is it,
Right.
I just think that there's, as a consumer, I honestly find advertising in certain environments overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just like, all right, enough already.
Yeah. I agree. There's some just overdone, tired, fatigued. Get it out of here. No, I'll never buy that thing.
And I don't know if you guys have observed it. I haven't watched a lot of the Olympics, but NBC is actually doing like the last hour sort of like commercial free on prime time. I mean, it's sponsored by fill in the blank,
right.
but it's sort of like a nod to what you guys just said, which is, okay, let's not chop this up. Let's keep everyone hooked in here. And I think it's pretty smart. I don't know what the ratings results are, but I think it's an interesting play by them.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's tied into other things that advertisers doing. To Joe's point about dialing up levers and dials to make sure that they're doing other things on site in Milan or in local markets, et cetera, that support that. I think every time you see, the Rolex, this hour was brought to you by Rolex, so you're like, wow, you don't forget it. You don't forget it. You just have to have a really good story. As opposed to a lot of these, Joe, you might have been talking about big pharma. When I see all these drug ads, it's of the demo, but there are marketing people who should know better that, it's a pretty finite group of people who are going to need this life-saving drug, and God bless them. But really, World News Tonight.
Sure as hell better not be allergic to it.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, that's great. And listen, that's also kind of closing in on our moment or two of fun, 40 plus minutes. So, Tony, what do you have as any last thoughts or things to talk about?
Well, I think I'll leave with this as we all talk about different people, and the three of us have known each other for 30 years. I talk a lot about with the young people at Echelon, and just for those who don't know, it's a young agency on hospitality, sports marketing, and branding consultant that I chair, is understand your business family tree, that there's all these connecting dots. And as you build your own brand, and who's Joe Uva, who's Ray Warren, who's Tony Ponturo, that becomes sort of a not to get too spiritual, but sort of an everlasting thing, right? It's like, and how you deal with people. Right. And, and Joe, you hit it on, well, how did you end up at Univision? Well, the person you worked with at Turner, you had a good relationship with, and the dot connected. And so I think the one thing I like to always keep underlying is, you know, understand your brand, understand you're going to meet people, understanding they can be lifetime relationships, and the dots will connect 30 years later. And I think it's just an important thing for 25-year-olds to understand.
Yeah, and we didn't even touch on work from home and hybrid workplace and meeting people in the elevator and all that. I don't know if we even have time. But Joe, I did want to ask you about Revolver and what you're doing there and how that, is that company that Tony talked about, the family tree and.
Sure. So Revolver Podcast is the largest multicultural podcast company in the United States by monthly downloads and audiences. And we rank number 18 on Podtrac's top 100. We publish over 100 podcasts every week, and we deliver about between 8 and 10 million downloads a month. And it's primarily in Spanish language. We do some bilingual, but the company was founded by a gentleman named Jack Hobbs, who ran Univision Radio Networks when I was there at Univision. We stayed in touch. I went on as an advisor, and now I'm the chairman of Revolver Podcast. And we have relationships throughout Latin America with all the big media owners, and here with on-air talent that we edit down their on air, whether it's a radio talk show or television show, whatever, pull the audio in and put it out.
Who sells it?
I'm sorry?
Who sells it?
So we have a relationship with SiriusXM, and SiriusXM has the exclusive sales and marketing partner for us in the United States, and we just signed an agreement with Televisa Univision to do the same in Mexico for us, because about 35% of our audiences come from Mexico. I will say that we are starting to venture out a little bit, and we're really excited about a project that's going to come up later this spring. A gentleman by the name of Campbell McLaren, who has a company called Combate Global, was one of the original founders of the UFC alongside Dana White. And we are doing a podcast with Campbell called No Rules with Campbell McLaren that's going to be about the history of how the UFC got started and the first 12 events they had, and it'll culminate with and around the June 14th event at the White House with the UFC's event there. So, and that'll be in English language. So we'll see how that goes. And
So just a little insight, not to invite myself on that podcast. I'm half kidding, but I went with two of our people to see the Furtado brothers, who own the UFC, who bought it for $2 million with Dana White. And their pitch was, we need a legitimate sponsor. And so we ended up doing a deal for Bud Light in the Octagon. And then in those days, we did a press conference. I would take Dana around to the broadcasters who wanted nothing to do with it. But we sponsored it. But the whole thing was, we think we have something here. They made it more tame, but they needed to legitimize it. So I keep waiting for my cut of the $5 billion but it hasn't arrived yet. Anyway, I digress. But it is
call Mark Shapiro.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, or Ari.
Well,
this has been great.
Yes,
Campbell,
thank you, guys.
So I'll look forward to hearing Campbell. And great time. Look at that. I mean, we're actually literally at the mark. So, Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Tony.
And we will keep in touch.
Thanks, everybody.